Hi. Hey, good to see you, Illeana, Randy, Captain Randy Cramer, and Ileana. It's lovely to get together with the two of you. It has been a long while since we had you speaking at FESIG. It was 2 years for Ileana, right? And it was like a year ago for you, Randy. Right.
Sounds
So
about right.
yeah, I think I'm going to, yeah, because Ileana was texting me the other day and saying, hey, could you um, contact those who are talking about the holographic regeneration made beds so we can do a round table. I said, oh, that's cool. Let's do it then. And here you are with Ileana and me. uh, well, so Captain Randy Cramer, also known as Captain K, had 20 years of experience with the Secret Space Program, most knowledgeable U.S. Marine Corps SS officer, and the only one given the direct authority through his chain of command to make that knowledge available to the public and civilian government. Apart from the disclosing of some of the most advanced technologies, Captain Randy spoke at FESIG 58 meeting 1 year ago about the SSP, about the SSP technologies. Yeah, SSP electromagnetic propulsion systems. You were talking about that, Randy, and the futuristic holographic regeneration made beds, as it is your mission to bring the Elysium type of technology for healing humanity. And if I may quote you, you did say that we should all share in the benefits of the progress of the true mastery we have over the laws of physics, energy generation, propulsion, and telecommunications from the SSP. You said that we should all have a future we could look forward to, and not just a pretty one for some, but for all the people of this living and conscious planet. Well
Sounds
said.
like something I would say.
Yeah, so that's good. And then Illeana, I have to introduce Illeana now. Ileana, sorry, I kept on mispronouncing your new name.
Okay.
Ileana is somewhat very special as well with where she's coming from. It is incredible. These two very special, unique um, beings of light here with me today. Ileana is a star traveler and an ET contactee who visits various worlds learning about ET races and helping humanity on their evolutionary path in life. Ileana taps into the superconsciousness universal field and transmits the soul records held at the divine source. The Star Traveler is in contact with the wisdom teachers, ETs, in the Andromeda Council, Arcturians, Pleiadians, elves, and other various races who share their wisdom with her. Ileana has her own unique special experiences to share and helps people to reach their highest soul potential by posting teachings about spirituality, ascension, ET contact, etc. on her website and YouTube channel. Well, I will be putting Captain Randy's and Ileana's websites on the link in the YouTube description of the YouTube channel. Okay. Right. Ileana does a cosmic reality show in her YouTube channel. Well, Ileana did speak at FESIG 48 meeting about 2 years ago. She was very prolific with the writings and even made videos of the holographic cellular regeneration medical beds technologies that had been, she said that it had been around for 80 years in the secret space program. And her illustrations and pictures of the holographic medical pods are amazing. And she has open bed MRI pods with biomimetic gel that will prevent burns and scarring, the portable Meditech heals and rejuvenate on location, she says. Anyway, I wouldn't want to say too much about that because we will see the pictures on the screen as she talks about them. And we have this roundtable with Captain Randy as well. So it's going to be very exciting when these two will be talking and sharing ideas and memories of them both using this in the secret space program experiences. Right, over to you, Captain Randy.
Oh, well, we know that there's close to a dozen different medical technologies that are being used across covert military space programs. So we're fully encouraged that any number of those technologies could find their way into the civilian sphere. So our particular agency that we're working on is focusing on the holographic cellular regeneration, but there are others. Emery Smets is a very good friend of mine, is working on patents for some other devices, and that there are other people working on some devices. Not every single person who says they're working on a device is working on a legit device. Let's just not name names, but say that just because someone says that they've got a device or a technology doesn't mean that they do. But we are looking at multiple technologies finding their way into the civilian sphere in one way or another. So I'm fully encouraged for any and all of those to make it that way. We're in no way trying to create some kind of a high-tech monopoly where we have the only, advanced cellular regeneration technology. We would be perfectly happy to see all of those devices find their way into the civilian sphere, into the civilian medical world, so that we can reduce the percentage of GDP that healthcare costs are, because as we increase healthcare costs across the board, the percentage of GDP goes up and up and up. And if you reach over 22 or 23% GDP cost of healthcare costs, it will absolutely snap the spinal column of the economy, which we're having trouble with anyway. So bringing those costs down and getting GDP percentages of medical costs to come way, way, way down is super important. And at some point, you just have to have a more effective, less expensive procedure. And the design and the construction of the device and the cost per minute, per hour, for use is less than other technologies, less than an MRI machine. So at some point, it's not just about having the advanced technology, it's about understanding that we have to reverse this course that we're on overpricing, overgouging, and overcharging people for medical care costs, and bring it down so that it's reasonable percentage of GDP. So there's a full economic reason how this has to work, as well as a technological one. I just wanted to bring those two things together.
All right, that sounds really good. Oh, what say you, Ileana? What do you think if this technology were to come out? It's going to take a long while before it can actually really get to the lay person. I mean, to the well, the third world country people, for instance, right? I mean, it's going to be very difficult to make it accessible to the poorer part of the population, isn't it?
Well,
because it's expensive.
Well, the thing is, these holographic medical pods that I know of from my hypnosis memories retrieval, they do a lot of cellular regeneration, like Randy said, to regrow limbs. So it's based on your DNA profile, and that goes into the AI program that's attached to the pod, and it regrows the limbs. So, and it also removes disease like cancer, multiple sclerosis, stuff like that. But like Randy said, there's also different pods. There's the pods based purely on plasma technology, on the plasma fields. And there's other holographical medical pods that have lasers that do micro keyhole surgery, and there's lenses. So it's remotely controlled by somebody, and it does that. And there's also the holographic medical pods with the mimetic gel that remove the burns, the scars from the skin. And when you're also age regressed backwards to 15, whatever, 18, when you left from your SSP service, the scars are not there. And these pods can also alter your memories. So they could put in anything that they want in your memory, or they can give you new memories. So that's what I know about these pods from my hypnosis regression. And I've been told it's like 200 years advanced on Mars with the planetary corporations, I would say about that. and getting it out into the public, it's like you have to know the schematics to build it. You have to have permissions with hospitals and clinics to get it in. So this is new technology. It's regenerative medicine, literally. So I don't have memories of schematics or anything. I have just the end user memories of how they're used and what you can do with them. So basically, you can bring back people from the dead as well with these holographic medical pods, resuscitation, and if the soul hasn't left the body completely, it's halfway there, you can still bring back a person, even if your head is chopped off or something is chopped off, you can regenerate that because it is DNA sequencing and genome sequencing. If they have that on file, they can regenerate you and splice you up and put you back in. So that's what I remember. Randy, is that somewhat accurate, would you say?
Oh, yeah, like I said, there's a number of specific technologies that they use. Those all sound pretty good to me from what I understand. To answer the question about access, we figure from the time that we're able to begin the manufacturing phase, it could be 10 to 20 years before you have like far reach into the third world. There's some questions and some gray area on exactly how long that'll take. We know that there will be some hospitals and clinics that would be eager to use the technology, some that will be eager to not use the technology. We think the best circumvention around that is to have our own clinics, have our own clinic system, so that people can come directly to our clinics instead of having to get access to the technology through another hospital or clinic that approves of the technology. But demand will increase immediately once people see, you know, their Uncle Joe who got his leg blown off by an IED walking around with a new leg, not a prosthetic. It's going to get pretty demanding for people to want access to the technology. So we kind of feel that all we really have to do is bring the technology to marketplace, get it, you know, people to get access to it, and then the demand will increase so that all of those other hospitals and clinics who are resistant will simply have the choice of not using the technology and falling by the wayside, or using the technology and joining the 21st century with everybody else. So the access will depend on a lot of that demand and what we can do with the manufacturing supply line. But we think global access is 10 to 20 years from a prototype. So that's not, we don't think that's a terrible amount of time, especially when you look at what it takes to develop some other medical technologies and get them into the system. We don't think that that's unreasonable or all. In fact, we think those are pretty good numbers.
Well, Captain Randy, Ileana was talking about her getting her memories back through hypnosis. But when you, in your case, when asked about how you got your memory back, you said that you are programmed for total recall, as you you have been programmed and engineered to self-repair.
Correct.
So you got total recall. Could you tell us more about that and how you got to keep your memory? And so it's all very clear in your mind, and you could re-engineer this technology just like that?
Well, total recall was a lengthy process. Let's start with that. But yeah, since I was designed to self-repair and to get total recall, it was an inevitability at some point that it was just going to happen. So it probably for me took place a little bit more quickly than it does for some people. But I know some younger people right now who are recovering memories at a younger age than I did. So there seems to be some curve with some of the newer subjects who are, you know, getting out of the programs and getting their memories back a lot more quickly. I'm not exactly sure why that's happening, other than that there may be some sort of just growth curve with people retrieving memories, and the more people who retrieve memories, the easier it makes it for other people after them to retrieve memories. So fortunately, in my case, it's not so much a matter of understanding a mastery of this technology through the memory process so much as it is remembering the conversations that I'd had with technicians about how the technology works, so that when my chief engineer and I sat down and started to talk about it, and I was like, okay, here's what I understand of how I remember how the components work together, what this component is, what this component does, how they operate together. We were able to connect the dots technologically through engineering to say, okay, if we know we want to achieve a technical device, a holographic projector that does A, B, and C, and we know this is sort of where we're at in the current state of industrial technology and holographic projectors, that point A to point B is getting from the technology that we currently have to what we want, and understanding the process of precision development of the components to get there. So it was more about simply understanding the process, understanding the components, understanding very basic rudimentary physics about it, and then being able to talk to someone who's an engineer, not me, I'm not an engineer, and he was able to use his engineer smarts so that we could put a basic plan and a strategy together on paper on how we would develop those components and put them together. So it's about taking a number of smaller components, developing them to the precision that we need them to be, and then putting them together and doing some tests. But from the conversations that I've had with my superiors, I'm well on the right track, and I've been told that if we just apply time, resources, and engineers to these problems, that it's pretty inevitable that we'll sort it out. So we just would love to get engineers started working on components so that we can build a prototype. But, you know, it's a funding issue we're still sorting out, but because some people there are plenty of people who want to help, but not all of them have access to the resources that we need to be able to start the process. And what we continue to find is those who have the financial wherewithal to assist in the process want more than we're willing to give them. So people have come along and wanted to buy the idea, or you know, purchase you know, a schematic or copyright or a patent or something like that, and we've had to say no to those people, because we're not giving the technology to anybody. We're not handing it over to someone else so that they can take control of the design, manufacturing, and marketing of the device and charge, you know, $10,000 an hour or something ridiculous, or whatever they might do. So we don't feel that handing the technology over to someone is a good idea. We don't feel like giving someone financial or creative control is a good idea. So as we just continue to deal with people who want more than we're willing to give them in order to exchange for funding, until we find the right funding sources who will allow us to maintain control of the project so that we can guarantee access. We're very firm about guaranteeing that access over time. And we know that if we hand it over to someone else, that we're absolutely won't be able to guarantee that access. So we're not willing to give up control just to allow someone else to run with it. We don't think that's a good idea.
Yeah, that's a good plan. I mean, it's to ensure that everyone has access. And oh, well, you know, you said that you hope to be able to help everyone find better solutions to the world's problems. Oh, the current problem is humongous. Yeah, we do need help. We certainly could do with this technology is being released, certainly. So that's why you were asked to bring your 20 years of knowledge and experience from a USAP no one has ever heard of until now to civilian government and the non-classified branches of the military. So you had the blessings of your superiors and
absolutely, yeah,
house, or who may be on the top rung of the ladder. So why is it that you're not getting the funding support, if that's the case?
Because we can't get funding support from our superiors, or then it becomes a classified military program. And we don't want it to be a classified military program. We want it to be a confidential civilian program so that we can introduce the technology to the civilian world without having to go through a stack of declassifications that would otherwise take twice as long as the development process to get that done. So we think that it's faster to do it this way as a civilian R&D project than it is to try and go through any of the sort of normal military channels. So we're just reliant on getting civilian support for that and getting civilian funding for that. Like I said, we've had plenty of interest in that, just no one who's willing to compromise on terms that we think are acceptable, and people who want to seem to make demands that we think are unacceptable. So it's all in the negotiation process at the moment. We have yet to negotiate with someone who wants the project to happen as badly as we do without wanting some control over it that we're not willing to give them.
Oh, I can see a bit of a clash here, Captain Randy, because if it's going to be civilian funding, it certainly would be under the control of some individuals. And that means access to the vast majority, it's going to be curtailed to a certain extent. And if not, that's going to be the cost constraint as well when you talk about availability to the masses.
Yeah, well, once we get to the manufacturing phase, then it's about really setting up the first clinic and or clinics with the first devices in them, which, you know, might be one clinic, might be half a dozen clinics where we'll be able to begin the process. There's always a slow start where you start somewhere, and whether it's one clinic or 10 clinics that we start with, or how many within the first few years it takes to get, you know, a dozen clinics around the country going. Again, we think it's just getting it out there is what will create the demand. Because at this point, there's a tiny percentage of people who know about this technology or know that it's, you know, on the threshold of being developed or coming into the civilian sphere. So we need a vast majority of the civilian population to understand the technology exists and functions for the demand to happen that would create the kind of billionaire investment that we would need in the manufacturing phase. So, you know, if we manage to crawl into, you know, a half a dozen clinics, it wouldn't take long before people would see the results, and then the billionaires would show up and say, hey, let's help you with the manufacturing phase. We'd like to help you make, you know, 1,000 units a year and set up, you know, 10 clinics, you know, every 6 months or something like that. Then we would be more than happy to talk with people about making that happen and, you know, what their financial return on investment that they can get for that. But it's essentially creating the demand through a certain amount of certainty of people seeing the technology function. We have plenty of people who have said, well, you know, show me a blueprint, show me a prototype. And it's like, we're not at that point that I can show you a blueprint or that I can show you a prototype. You know, I have to have engineers in a lab before I can show you a blueprint or a prototype. Or let me see something function. I'm like, well, we don't have that yet. So some people who are willing to, you know, show up with more funding want to see more that we haven't been able to show yet. And that's just where we are in the process. So we know that once we get to a certain point of demonstrating the technology functions, showing that it can restore cellular regeneration to anybody for any reason, it won't take long after that the big billionaire bucks would show up for us to escalate the manufacturing and distribution and, you know, getting more clinics open so that we can have more access. So it will be sort of an exponential process. We'll start slow and then it will build up, and, you know, within, again, that first 10 to 15 years, we'll be able to see a substantial acceleration in access of the number of units, the number of clinics, and the number of patients that can be served. But it's a process. It's a process, and we're in the process. So I'm not going to cry about it.
Right. I know. Well, it takes a bit too long, isn't it, to bring out the people? We need it now. Look at the world.
Well,
now.
There's a lot of things that we need now, but we're not going to get everything that we need now. We're going to get the things that we need soon. So there are a number of things that could happen in the next, say, 3 years, just 3 to 5 years, just out of throwing that up in the air, that could accelerate this process tremendously. So, but we have to wait for those things to sort of occur, or for the demand to increase to the point where, you know, we get the support that we need because the demand increases of making it happen. So it's we know that it's gonna happen. It's just a matter of when, and our focus and dedication to making that happen is unwavering, and we will continue to seek out the financial support and work on the technological issues that we can on paper until we have engineers and labs that we can actually start solving component problems. Mm-hmm. So we'll get there at some point. I would like it to happen as soon as anybody else would like it to, but we're also understanding that it will happen when it happens, and when it does, you know, we'll have it. Maybe we need it now. Sure, we needed it 10 years ago, but when we have it is when we'll have it. And, you know, the world is changing because of a number of technology and large-scale global change issues that are happening, and those are only going to increase. We're going to see more global change issues occurring, and we're going to see more technology showing up, and those things converging and getting a little messy. But when it all sorts out, we're going to have better technology than what we have right now. We're going to have better access than we have right now, and some of the large-scale social, political, global events that are going to occur, we think will also accelerate that demand for those things. So we just have to wait for it to sort out in some ways.
Ileana was in the secret space program as well with the interplanetary corporate conglomerate on the Mars basis.
No, it's planetary corporations. It's not interplanetary corporate
planetary corporate corporations, right? Okay. Thank you for correcting me. Now, you said you saw and you have used this medical pods before yourself?
Well, I wasn't allowed to use them on myself. I was just to put in soldiers coming out of the field who had limbs burned off, like burns, limbs missing, stuff like that. Because when soldiers on Mars do battle, sometimes you get stuff missing. It's either bitten off by insectoids, it's reptilians there that can attack you. It could be a storm. You can lose your eyes. You could lose limbs. Anything can happen on Mars because it's a harsh atmosphere. So what happens is they have Neuralink implants in their brains, and if something happens to the soldier, because it's nanotechnology with the Neuralink implant, like in your brain, and your smart suit malfunctions, and you have whatever, like burns or something is cut off a limb, they call in a portable Meditech unit that comes in. It's a stasis pod. You climb into it and it takes you back to the base and it keeps you alive. It keeps it keeps your vitals alive because it's a stasis pod. Or if you can't get in yourself, it literally, there's an electromagnetic field, so you levitate into it. Your smart suit puts you into it and it carries you back into the base, puts you into the holographic medical pod, and then whatever's missing is regenerated on the cellular genetic level. And, you know, if you have cognitive problems, if you have neurological problems in your brain, that gets fixed as well. So that's what the super soldiers are, or the cybernetic soldiers, cyborg human soldiers, because they have a lot of nanotechnology embedded in them. And the pod also fixes that technology as well. If the Neuralink implant is damaged, it fixes it.
And then it can be used for the physical age regression as well, isn't it, on human beings?
Yeah. What happens is if it does age regression where they're taking you back. When you're done in your service record, they take you back and they age regress you. 0 point, there's a component where they reverse the telomeres, because if your telomeres are aged and damaged, they have to reverse that on the cellular level and also on your body, the rest of your body organs. They have to reverse the aging process, and that's what the plasma field does in the pod.
Right. You know, you are known for being such a detailed, meticulous researcher on the holographic regeneration mid-beds, and you were actually one of the first to have come up with loads of beautiful illustrations, spot on, to illustrate what you were writing about them. Would you want to flip it up on a screen to share screen, so the viewers can see what we are talking about? A picture says 1,000 words, doesn't it?
Yeah, I can share the screen.
So Captain Randy can also add in from where he's coming from as well. It's incredible. You didn't know each other in the secret space program then. I mean, you've forgotten, but you share the same what you call rendition of the experiences that you had with this technology.
Yeah.
And so who would not believe it? I mean, this is incredible. I mean, the two of you come from different areas of your work and hadn't met each other in the secret space program departments where you were working in, and yet you share the same experiences here that you are describing right now that the viewers are looking at. Go on then, Ileana.
So this is one type of a pod that does the laser stuff and the keyhole surgery. It's an Elysium type of pod, if you've seen that movie. So it's on a stand. It has laser scalpel, airtight operating shield, computer control robotic surgical arms, vital signs sensors, adjustable titanium base, liquid spray anesthetic, comfortable limb restraints if that's needed during surgery. So that's one type of a pod that I remember. And this is the holographic AI technology attached to it. So it reads, if you have cancer, it reads your genome sequence and it can tell you what's wrong in the body, and it can just fix that. And it says 100% health improved, or what it's able to improve. So that's kind of the 3D anatomical scanning lens with the AI technology that's attached to it. And there's also, these are the older type of pods with the mimetic gel in it, with the lasers and the lenses. So older technology. This is the newer technology as well, lasers and stuff, and it could fix burns, it could fix scars, it could fix like blood wounds. Again, that's the holographic technology, and it shows in your body what's going on there.
Sorry to interrupt, Captain Randy. Could you recollect with your intact total recall, this is exactly what it is that you see in these illustrations that you have been using?
I mean, they're similar. These seem to be sort of like some form of somebody's media representations of some of this technology, but it's all pretty close. So, but again, most of these like surgical beds and so forth isn't really what we used. I'm mostly familiar with the holographic regenerators, but like I said, there's at least a dozen other technologies that they've been using across the board. The entire programs are experimental, so they're constantly experimenting with different technology in different fields, in different areas. Different divisions will get access to different technology as a test group so that they can get, you know, statistical numbers on how effective those technologies are, so that you can compare technologies across divisions, cost per soldier, cost per day, and so forth, and so that some beam counter can do the math on what they think the most cost-effective technology is to use, as well as the most effective.
Yeah, now this one is the type that does the cellular regeneration. If you have limbs that have been blown off, that can regenerate it. And also it has the laser arms to get rid of stuff. So it's really about different technologies and different types of pods that are available. Now, these are just, like Randy said, media images of what I remember these things look like. They're not my drawings, and I'm honest about that because I'm not a graphics artist. So I just put this together to give people an idea what this looks like, and that's the portable Meditech units. Kind of, that's what brings you into the base if you have damaged stuff on you, and it keeps you alive, vital signs and stuff. That's what's got the electromagnetic fields. And that's an older holographic medical pod as well that you're in, and it regenerates limbs and stuff. So it's basically kind of the mimetic gel that I was telling Crystal about that can get rid of burns and stuff and damaged tissue. Yeah, and that's the holographic aspect of it, to regenerate the limbs and stuff. See, that's the new hand. It's a little bit wet. That's a regenerated hand. After you've climbed out of the pod and the technology, and you're like looking at your hand. I have my hand back. It's been regenerated. So that's kind of like, that's what's attached to these pods from what I understand from the hypnosis. Yeah, so.
According to Jared Rand's description of his celestial chambers, he did say that it does, the technology that he's using in the celestial chamber actually takes into the software, the genetic blueprint of the person, and then it just reads it and it regenerates back into the exact original soul signature genetic blueprint of that person. Say if that person has lost the arm and it needs to be grown back, and I suppose it reactivated the salamander genes in the person and just grows it back. Is that going in tandem with what you had experienced in Mars?
Well,
Ileana?
Well, personally, like, you have to have a clean genetic profile in the database to use to regenerate things. It has to be perfectly healthy, from what I remember. How about you, Randy?
Yeah, usually it's from a blood sample that they've taken, you know, when you were totally healthy and everything was together. So they're using from an ideal genetic profile that has to get taken before you're wounded. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. I'm very skeptical about claims of, like, you know, we're going to be selling these things, these celestial chambers, these plasma beds. I'm very skeptical about when it's going on in the market and it's all advertised and stuff. I'm very skeptical about that.
People making claims that something's going to be available in 6 months or next year without identifying their R&D or their manufacturing process, I think is blowing smoke and rainbows up somebody's butt, because there is a very, like, bean county process that, you know, from research to prototype to manufacturing, that takes time. And those are amounts of time that without someone to be able to identify, you know, who's manufacturing. If someone says, I got a device that's coming out next year, I'm like, who's manufacturing it? And it's like, well, we don't have anybody manufacturing it right now. Then I'm like, well, then it's not coming out next year. Because if you don't have someone who's already, you know, working on the manufacturing process, you're not going to have them available in 6 months or 12 months. There's protocols that you have to go through. You have to, you know, do all of the essentially setting up of the manufacturing process. You can't just walk into a factory and say, we're going to start making these. You got to set up exactly how the process is, all the machinery that you need, all of the 3D printers that you need. You have to train laborers to put them together. You have to come up with a protocol that engineers can do together, that manufacturers can use to put the components together and assemble them. That all takes time. And anyone who thinks that they can snap their fingers and make that happen in 6 or 12 months is just talking crap, because the amount of time it takes to do those things is simply longer than that. There's just not a way that in the world that we live in, and the manufacturing and capitalist structure that we have, simply doesn't move that quickly. Just doesn't move that quickly.
Yeah, and just Crystal, we're going to be up in about a minute, so you guys will need to rejoin in, okay?
Yeah, we have to rejoin, and Ileana will just splice it together.
Mm-hmm. It's telling you less than a minute to go. So.
Just a minute. Okay, I have a question. Okay, now, Captain Randy, you're saying that, okay, so because you were registered as an official captain in the USMC, so therefore your cellular blueprint has already been registered and taken when you were well and whole and well and yeah, everything's perfect, right? What about those of us here who hadn't had those records that you could actually help regenerate back with the device, with the technology? Is it not in our the blueprint? Is it not in our auric field? In our, of course, you were well, you were young, and they have taken your genetic blueprint and everything is in the database. So it's good to regenerate you very quickly with what they have got already with their technology. But what about the majority of us here? I mean, we hadn't had our genetic blueprint in any database when we were young and perfect and whole. And how are they going to record that?
You can usually still get an ideal genetic profile from a bone marrow sample or there's some other parts of the body that you can usually get a good clean sample from. We usually don't recommend like that you take like a skin cell sample, but like an actual bone marrow sample, something that's deeper in the body that you're likely to get a pure genetic profile from. So it's still possible to get a clean genetic profile from someone who hasn't had a previous profile logged in. There are also some ways in which this is a software issue, how the software, when it's translating that genetic profile into an image, that it can adjust without giving away proprietary conversations about how the software works. There are ways that the software can also adjust to make sure that you're using the clean profile or the cleanest version of the profile that you can.
Mm-hmm. Wow. Don't we have the original genetic blueprint from our soul signature within our auric fields, our spiritual fields?
Yeah, we do, but I wouldn't know how to get a copy of that. I wouldn't know what technology to use to get a copy of that and then translate into the software what the genetic profile would be. So that's an interesting question. I can propose that to some people to think about how that could be done. But from a technological process, I'm not sure.
Because if you remember, when somebody passed on to the other side, right? And there had been many instances when psychic clairvoyants could see, oh, that person who has just passed on to the other side became young again and perfect and whole. I mean, so many instances like that. So I presume it's somewhere in our auric fields, our spiritual fields, that genetic blueprint in perfection.
Yeah, it is. Again, it's just how do you translate that information into software? And that's a question that I don't have an answer to and that I would propose to some people to sort out. But
that comes to Ileana now. Ileana has been writing about something about capturing souls and putting it in a tank, and then before transferring it into a cyborg body or a clone body. Ileana, would you want to pull that out? It's so fascinating. I mean, of course, if you capture souls, I mean, it's there. The soul has the genetic blueprint, the original imperfection one.
Yeah, I'm just going to skip. This is what it looks like. So it's soul capturing technology, soul transference. So when they're making a cyborg, they could pull your soul out of your body through the holographic aspect of the software, and it's put into an electromagnetic stasis field where the soul is kept. And then it's transferred to another cyborg soldier. So you could swap that out. You could swap out from one person, you could put a soul into another, or they keep them in these, what looks like an egg type of a device where the soul is and the body's separate from it. And you're kept in a regeneration stasis, a fluidic chamber while the soul is extracted and put into another body. So that's how I remember that technology. And yeah, it's pretty it's very weird looking stuff that they can do with your soul. Take it out of your body and put it into somebody else.
Isn't that a violation of universal law?
It is. It is. But what do they care about that on Mars? If they want to extract your soul from your body, they can, and they could put it into a different body, like a cybernetics soldier or a clone body. So that's, you know.
Yeah, don't they have like a galactic federation kind of ruling and policies and laws?
Well, if you see in the left-hand side here, you see the person is strapped to a table and their soul is extracted. That's the soul capture technology, and they can put you in a cyborg or they could put you in a clone. On Mars, there's no federation or anything that prevents you from doing that kind of stuff.
Well, and the loophole is that if the subject agrees to the process, it's not against the law. So doing it to someone against their will is a violation, but if the subject agrees or they claim that the subject has agreed legally, then it's not a violation of the law. It's allowed.
Why would any subject agree to such horrible treatments?
All kinds of reasons. I can think of a people that would line up around the block if you offered them tomorrow the opportunity to be put into a cybernetic body. There are people who would jump at that chance. I'm not saying I'm one of them, but there are people who would readily agree to that if you gave them the choice.
Yeah, because honestly, when you're in a cybernetics body, everything is enhanced. Your strength, your speed, your eyes, you have memory, everything is increased. So you're basically a super soldier, superhuman now, because you've been augmented with nanotechnology and cybernetics. So you're faster, you're stronger, you're more smarter, everything is enhanced. So that kind of ability, it makes you a superhuman.
Oh yeah, plenty of soldiers who would readily agree to that. I personally wouldn't, because then you're completely and absolutely dependent on technicians to keep you repaired and functional. And without those technicians to keep you repaired and functional, you're a toaster that could break down and be tossed out. But plenty of people who would readily agree to that given the choice.
Yeah,
But also, what about consciousness? Wouldn't it be taken over by the AI?
No, it's merged at that point. The consciousness merged. It's like your brain merging with a computer. It's not like one takes over. They're cooperating, working together. So it becomes a fusion process. It's a hybridization process.
Exactly.
Whatever happens to the integral I am that I am, the divinity in the sovereign integral self, be compromised?
It's still in there, and if the subject again has made the choice, then as far as their sovereignty is concerned, they've made the choice to make that fusion and to make that connection. So again, it's not a violation at that point.
Yeah, because
I'm not saying it's good, but it's not technically a violation.
yeah, and there's like Neuralink implants in the subject's brain that allows you to have the synthetic telepathy again with other people that have these implants. So you don't have to fully be augmented with cybernetics and nanotechnology. You could choose to have parts of it, like the Neuralink implants. You're just not serving out in the field. You're working in these cybernetics labs then in running these pods, making sure that everything is good, that the soldiers are repaired correctly in the pods, doing genetic testing. That's what I was doing. I was not out in the field. So
yeah, and when you want your technicians to have a near 100% effectiveness rate, putting a chip in their brain increases their efficiency and makes sure that they do their job, more accurately, more often than not. It reduces human error.
It does. And these Neuralink implants, from what I remember, they're even better than chips. They're nanotechnology. So it's like, you can't even see it with an MRI scan. It's so small. So, and some have microchips, like the CIA programs and stuff. Those soldiers have microchips in their brains too. And some on Mars.
Show. I mean, whatever happens to the natural, original, organic, bioorganic beings that we are in this physical vehicle of a human body that the soul resides in. Like every cell, every molecule of the body is intelligence itself. So if you're replacing that with a machine, a cyborg material, it's matter. It's artificial intelligence. It's no longer the original organic chemical. The original.
No, it's not an original. It's a fusion or a hybrid of technologies. But you're still moving something from one vessel to another. So you can make distinctions about whether one vessel is biological and one vessel is more mechanical, but there's still just a jar that the soul, the quantum fluid dynamic goes into either jar can hold it. The quantum fluid dynamic of your soul and your consciousness still functions in either the biological shell or the mechanical shell. So that it's not to say that they're exactly the same, but it's also not correct to say that you're completely taking away the free will of the individual, or you're somehow making them no longer human, or no longer having human consciousness or human feelings or any of those things. You're simply changing the vessel and the interface of that vessel, which has some benefits and maybe some drawbacks. But again, the people who are being given that choice usually readily volunteer for that based on the perks that they think that they're going to get from that. Whether those perks are really worth the value that those people think that they are, I guess that's a personal decision on that. I don't necessarily think that they are, but it doesn't take away from the divinity of a person to put them in a mechanical body. It doesn't make them soulless. It doesn't turn them into a machine. It doesn't make them no longer a spiritual being. It's just changes the interface in which they're interacting and the shell with which they're using, and what they can interact with the world and how they can interact, what the machine advantages are, the electronic memory advantages, cybernetic strength, agility, endurance, impermeability, those kinds of things. It's a cost-benefit analysis, I'm sure, for the people who do it, but it doesn't just automatically turn someone into a soulless zombie robot. That's just not how the technology works. But you're probably taking someone who, the type of person that might be willing to do that might be someone who's a higher percentage of being a psychopath anyway, to be willing to become a cyborg killing machine. So at that point, you're not necessarily getting a soulless psychopathic cyborg killer because you turned a good person into a soulless psychopathic cyborg killer. You took a human psychopathic killer and turned them into a cyborg psychopathic killer. So there's really not much change there.
What I don't understand is Ileana's talking about the soul being transferred onto the cyborg body, which is maybe 60% inorganic because it's made of machines, metallic. Okay, so how is the play of consciousness in connection with the 5 or 6 or 7 senses, the sense of touch, smell, taste, and everything come into play? I mean, machines, metal don't have those senses.
Oh, yes, they do. Oh, they certainly do. Oh my goodness. The sensory apparatus for some of those machines is more sensitive and more accurate than the senses that you and I have.
Well, don't forget, it's still a biological body with nanotechnology augmentation in it. So it's not what you think as a cyborg. It's kind of like, I think it's almost 50-50 part biological, part augmented with technology. It's not all metal and it's not all it's not all machine. So it's both, half, I think. That's what it is.
Yeah, I mean, if you really want the advantages of having a person in a machine body, you still have to have some organic brain tissue, and to have organic brain tissue, you still have to have something that generates oxygen to that brain and pumps blood to the brain. So you still need, something that operates as lungs and something that operates as a heart. And you still have to have some biological, exchange of proteins and carbohydrates and sugars and so forth that still functions biologically inside a augmented, polycarbonate metallic shell of some kind. Yeah, to transfer the person into a straight up machine is a different technology, and it's not one that's been very well perfected at this point. I know some people are still hoping that they're going to be able to do that, but I think there's some problems with trying to put an organic consciousness into a pure machine, robot type shell, which some people imagine being able to happen. But mostly there has to be some organic tissue, because you have to have some brain tissue. You can have a cybernetic brain that has, augmentations, chips and wires and stuff in it, but it still has to have a biological core to be able to hold that person.
Yeah, I mean, you wouldn't even know if you've met a cyborg soldier or if it's fully human. It looks human and acts human because it has the skin and has everything outer that we have. Is just augmented with cyborg technologies and nanotechnology, which is all internal.
Right.
So it's not like the Borg where everything, you know, your
Right.
Borg machine. It's not like that.
It's more like a Terminator in the sense that you've got this organic skin around whatever's happening underneath. So what looks like from the outside just looks like a person.
Yeah, exactly.
You got to tear them apart to start seeing where the mechanic stuff is.
That's what I mean. Oh dear.
Well, I mean, and you were asking what happens to the biological being, its body. It's kept in stasis in a regeneration tank. So the soul transfer technology, they can
you
take.
show that again, Ileana?
Yeah,
Well,
yeah, I can. Yeah.
So the viewers can imagine what you're saying. Otherwise, it's a little
Yeah.
bit too far-fetched for most people.
Yeah, I can show that again. So let me just find a regen tank here. It's a big presentation. So yeah, these are the regeneration tanks. So your body can be kept in a regen tank. You're in stasis while your soul is taken out of your body and transferred into the biological cybernetic body. And then once the person is done with that mission, or it can go, the soul can go into a clone, then they can take your soul out of that and put it back into your original container body. And you walk out of the regeneration tank. So they don't destroy your original body. If you didn't agree to that, they don't destroy it, because the soul, you can, with the soul catcher technology, you can take it out of the body, the soul, and you can put it into another container vessel, like Randy was saying, then take it out of that container vessel and put it into the original body. So that's what these programs allow you to do. This advanced technology on Mars and planetary corporations. That's what I witnessed happening there while working in these labs, and that's another regeneration tank. So yeah.
So they could just hijack souls as and when they wish to and want to, without the 100% permission from the owner.
Yeah, they don't need 100% permission. If you're fascinated with the programming, you said yes to it, they can take you out of your body and put you in other bodies.
Oh, wow. Wow.
Yeah, I mean, recruiters and salesmen have an interesting way of getting people to say yes to things that they don't necessarily fully understand that they're saying yes to. But if you say yes and you sign on the dotted line, then you're giving them permission, and it's legally okay at that point. I mean, someone can convince you to sign away your organs, you know, to be able to be harvested from your body to, you know, be given to someone else. And if you sign on the dotted line, you're, you know, giving someone permission to do that. So if someone convinces you that it's a good idea and you've been sold on the concept and you sign, then it's legit.
That is so way out of line.
But the thing is, that's the loophole, because they can just put your soul back into your original body and it hasn't been harmed. The body's still there and your soul is back into it.
Right.
So it's not like...
That is right. That's the loophole there. We didn't do anything to hurt your body or your consciousness. It's still all intact.
But
traumas aside.
Soul, consciousness and soul, it's the same. I mean, it's been badly traumatized, and the soul still carries the memories of the trauma during that borrowed period when that soul has been put into so many situations in combat or in whatever that the bidding was at that time. So how do you explain that? I mean,
that's not against the law. That's not a violation. Just because, I mean, someone gets exposed to trauma in the field or trauma as part of their job, the employer is not necessarily responsible for that trauma. They may be responsible for a certain amount of medical treatment to assist someone to sort of recover from that trauma, which they may or may not, you know, do, but they're not liable at that point. If the subject has made an agreement in any way, shape, or form and is signed on the dotted line in any way, shape, or form, then the trauma is, you know, part of the baggage that the subject has to deal with. but it's not against it's not a violation at that point just because someone's been subjected to a situation that was traumatic. Lots of situations that are traumatic that people just have to live with because of their jobs in covert military space program activities. That's just kind of a norm. Trying to say that the program is liable for every single trauma to every single person is ridiculous. I think that we still need to have a better source of treatment for people who are recovering from those traumas, but the notion that somehow those, you know, that the leadership or the employer is somehow liable for that trauma, they're not. They're just not legally liable for it.
Yeah, so we are talking about the physical regeneration part of things, physically. But what about the consciousness? What about the emotions? What about all this that is the mind, body, spirit connected as one that makes us the sovereign being that we are? Yeah. So if just repairing the body, what about the mind? What about the consciousness? If souls can be hijacked and put into very, very traumatic situations, it will fragment it, won't it?
Not necessarily. Fragmentation isn't a guaranteed impact of a trauma. So it really depends on either an intentional or unintentional process in the treatment or recovery of people during their traumas or after their traumas. But again, it's just not, it's still sort of in the wheelhouse of the responsibility of the subject at that point to be treated and get treatment, and not necessarily legally on the employer or the covert program to be responsible for that. I would argue that there should be, but at this point, it's just not fully legally established that that responsibility is set. So, you know, they get away with what they can because it's what's legally in the contracts. So if those are things that we would like to see be different, we have to change how the contracts are written.
Well, you know, you can have a perfectly healed body. Everything is in perfection physically, but mentally, well, we're going to get very mentally sick people in a perfect body, unfortunately, if we are not looking into developing technologies to heal the soul, heal the consciousness, heal the
Absolutely
mentality. Yeah. So that is another area we all need to look into.
But we're not helpless. If we're starting to get memories, you can go do hypnosis, you can go see the spiritual counselor to help you with that. So you're not totally helpless. I got shaman training and I worked through my issues and I did hypnosis. And that's how I worked through my trauma because, you know, I started collecting weapons. I started collecting swords when I first started remembering my SSP stuff. I have basic battle ready training, and I know how to use semi-automatic assault rifles without any training, and I passed for the restricted license, and I ended up with a bit of a collection that I have lugged around everywhere with me. So, you know, and I asked myself, why do I have these weapons? Why do I need them? It's just cellular memory of, I enjoyed laser phaser weapons on Mars, just the basics of that training. So I'm like, I enjoy it here still. It doesn't mean I'm going to go off and do anything with it because I haven't. It's just a collection. I don't even go to the range to shoot. But I like that futuristic look of the P series, the FS and FN series. I just like the look of it because it looks scientific in sci-fi. Except here it fires projectile bullets, and there it fires laser phaser.
And what about your, Captain Randy? You said you have your memory, total recall memory intact. What about you? Are you attached to weapons? Like no.
I'm sorry. Say again. I'm sorry. Say that last part again.
Are you sort of like Ileana, fascinated with weapons because you have been so used to using them in Mars in combat with the Mars Defense Force that you were in? Since your memory is intact.
I'm comfortable with any weapon in my hand. Yeah, absolutely. But I don't need to have, I don't have a collection. No, I don't, but that's a personal choice. I mean, I kind of I have some friends who like their guns, and they have their collections, and I've had some people ask me, why don't you have one of this? You should have some self-protect. You should have some guns to protect yourself. And I always say, nah, guns are for pussies who can't fight hand to hand. So I consider my hand-to-hand skill to be far better than my skill with a weapon. So I really am in better shape if someone pulls a gun on me with my bare hands than I am to try and pull a gun on them in return. I can actually be faster with just my bare hands.
Yeah, I don't pull weapons on anybody that's in safe storage. I don't use it. It was just part of the memories coming back, and me following the programming of liking to collect weapons. It's programming, and I stopped the programming once I realized what was happening. So I got the healing shaman training and all that other stuff. For me, weapons, firearms, they're not to kill people with. It's just a collection, and it's all stored away and locked under safes and keys. So I don't take that out. I don't show it to people. I don't use it. I don't go to the firing range. It was just part of the collection. It was me enjoying collecting weapons. Simple as that. Because I was recalling the stuff on Mars and trying to find an equivalent on Earth for it. Just like searching, not fully understanding when you get back the memories, what the heck you're doing and why you're doing it. I also got a motorcycle, and I had a exuberant need for speed to get the helmet on, to get that spacesuit looking thing to ride, and to like, I worked through that. I don't ride much anymore. It's just when you did things elsewhere, and that's part of your memories, sometimes you enact that when you first get your memories back. It's thrilling. You just cycle through that again in the equivalent of what you have on Earth. And that's not necessarily healthy, I know that now. But when it comes back, it's thrilling.
Yeah, it's fascinating, and so good to know that whatever they did to you in your contract with them, you come back here whole and well in your consciousness, in everything except maybe the health a bit has been compromised, but you're slowly getting back that for yourself, right, Ileana? That's very good. Hey, I wanted to know, look at the two of you. I just want to continue what I'm saying before I move on to another topic. The two of you are so honorable, so lovable and likable, and you don't have to reenact whatever you've gone through in a war zone in the Mars Defense Force situation, and it's really incredible, right? So that really shows the soul growth progression. It does bring you back whole again. All right, so now I'm going to move on to something, Ileana. You were talking about hijacking the soul, okay, capturing the soul from the body and borrowing it into a cyborg body or something like that. And then Penny Bradley was talking about how when some of you went through the MK Ultra torture chambers and everything when you were young, and you got so badly traumatized that the soul fractures, and then when the soul fractured into many pieces, it's again captured into a jars or whatever, and put into even a TR-3B spacecrafts and things like that. How does that work? It's really strange. How can one soul be fractured into many souls and then put into many different clones or cyborgs or even machines like the crafts?
Well, kind of exactly how it says that it's happening. You are taking something that is a whole, but it's still a quantum fluid dynamic, so it's a fluid, and fracturing it enables it to split and divide apart. And so you can take one part here and one part there and put one part in this vessel and another part in that vessel, bring them back into a same vessel again, and cram them back into another vessel together, where they have to sort out how they remerge into a whole being. That was not the program that we were in, that I was in, did not use, trauma-based mind control. So that's not an issue for me, but it's terrible for people who have to go through it. And we're highly against the lawful use of it because we think it's way too damaging to the personnel that it's used on, and we think that there's a human rights violation in there somewhere for sure. But it works kind of how it sounds like it works. You're taking if you have a coffee cup that's full of liquid and you divide that liquid into two halves, you can put one in another cup and one in two separate cups. And because the conscious soul spirit is a quantum fluid dynamic, it can be divided up into different vessels in a similar way, but it takes that kind of fracturing or dividing to usually some pretty serious trauma to be able to do that.
Yeah.
Again, we don't
So
approve.
difficult to put Humpty Dumpty back on again once it's
Very.
broken into tiny pieces.
Very.
Yeah, so how are people going to get all, like Penny Bradley was writing about her trying to find her soul fragments and to bring it all back together to be whole again. So how do you explain that, Ileana?
Well, I've never had that done to me. Planetary Corporations just does the body swap. Takes your soul from one body, puts it in another, and then puts you back in. But they don't fracture your soul, even though I think it's despicable what they do, taking your soul out of the body in the first place, but they don't do the mind fracture stuff. They don't do MK Ultra. They don't like the messy aspect of that, of having a broken soul. They don't want that. They just want you in, do the job, get out, put you in another body, do it, get out and do it again. And that's enough for them. So I've never had mind fracture. I just have one personality. This is me, and I'm always in control. I don't have alters.
Yeah, and my understanding is it's a technology that's been getting weeded out over time. It's used less and less and less because it's simply not getting your most bang for your buck with your personnel. You're losing time, you're losing effectiveness and efficiency every time you fracture someone. So if you really want to get the most use out of a subject, you want them to be whole as possible. So it's been phased out more and more over the decades. I don't think it's hardly used at all anymore on any of the newer subjects. I don't think so, to my knowledge. Doesn't mean that someone's not doing it somewhere because they still like it somehow, but it's mostly been phased out.
Yeah, I mean, I'm a fresher batch than Penny. I'm 35. Penny's in her 60s, so that was never done to me. And if you do have alters that you have to integrate, you need counseling, shamanic, soul integration. So there's ways of dealing with that to reintegrate your soul as a whole when you're back on Earth. Like, it's soul retrieval. So you just slowly have to integrate all those personalities back into you as a whole. So that's how you fix Humpty Dumpty if you're broken. Pretty much.
It can be a tedious process, though. Yeah, it can be a very tedious process, no question.
Messy, but it can be done. But that technology, like Randy said, it's sloppy, it's old, it's not useful. You want a whole soldier, not parts of a person.
Yeah, it's just not cost effective when it comes right down to it. So it's not used, to my knowledge, anymore, or it's been phased out over the decades. So younger people that I've talked to don't seem to have those problems. It doesn't seem to be something that they're using on them at all. They seem to have their heads a lot more clear and a lot more together and a lot more solidly as one person than people back in the day who were ripped apart. So that's a good thing. That's a good thing that it's, not really used anymore. But for people who have still been through programs that's done, it's a tedious process, but putting it back together can be done. It's just a slow, tedious process. You have to be patient, have to be really patient with yourself.
Has the fragmented souls in the far-flung corners of the universes has got a homecoming device, a homecoming beacon that would travel back to the main base of the soul to be put back again into one Humpty Dumpty again, one piece?
I don't know enough about the process to be able to answer that question.
Well, you as the main personality come back, and you come back with alters of other personalities. That's what multiple personality disorder is. So then you have to slowly reintegrate yourself into one personality again, so the others don't take you over temporarily. That's as much as I know about, when you have that mental issue of your personality and other personalities, if you've been in the SSP, you have to reintegrate that back in. But again, I don't know a lot about that, and I can't really answer more than that, honestly, because you just have to, if you don't want to remember those alters, you don't have to. You just have to try your best to be one personality, your core one, and not transfer to the others, not let them take you over, is basically the only thing you have at your recourse.
Right.
Yeah, I having worked with some people who have to deal with that, I explained to them, look, you have to make sure that there's one person in the driver's seat with the hands on the wheel, and all the other people, you know, telling you backseat driving, you have to keep them out of the driver's seat. So as long as your central personality is at the wheel of the vehicle, the other voices and backseat drivers don't really matter, but it is about keeping your driver at the wheel and not giving the wheel to somebody else. That's the metaphor that I use to explain to people.
So there's no point in fixing the body into perfection physically with the holographic cellular regeneration made beds if you can't fix the mind and the consciousness and the soul as well. And if it's so fragmented and it's so difficult to get all the pieces back into the one original to make the whole again, that is something to think about, you know? It's really something. But whatever it is, so they say that at the end of the day, Homo sapiens sapiens ascension would not be stopped. It's still on schedule, and it will get there. If you are thinking of the looking glass, and at the end of it, it is still coming together again, despite all those atrocities that have been done to human beings out there in the secret space program, in the whatever far-flung places where the malevolent ETs have been doing to us as experiments.
Well, I believe it's always worth fixing the body, no matter if you have fragmented souls.
Of course, I believe in that as well. So, Captain Randy, you said that you were working with your chief engineer, who is an ex-NASA guy. Correct. I presume that he was in Mars working with you as well to experience the workings of the holographic cellular regeneration.
No, he has been a terrestrially bound engineer his entire life. So, but he's genius in his own right and has a very clear understanding of engineering in a way that when I explain, here's how I understand how it works, here's how I've had it explained to me, his ability to translate that into functional engineering is, like I said, genius level. So it's a collaborative effort for sure. I wouldn't be able to do it without him, and he wouldn't be able to do it without me, but it's, you know, chocolate and peanut butter. It comes together and it works out. So, yeah.
And you were talking about the dominant harmonic frequency resonance in your technology, which is the notion that if you have a dominant frequency, it will change the waveform of a different frequency. Essentially, it's using a holographic projection of a cellular tissue, you were saying. So would you want to elaborate on that?
Sure. Dominant harmonic frequency resonance is if I have a perfect image of a cell and I project it over a damaged cell, the damaged cell wants to conform to the perfect image. And so the cool part, I think, about this technology is nothing really external is being done. You're telling the body through an external means to repair itself. So it's not really the machine or the bed or the hologram that's repairing the body at all. Your own cellular tissue is repairing itself. It's just doing so from an instruction to do it perfectly instead of to just, you know, wing it and kind of do it imperfectly, which is what our bodies do now mostly when they repair. Yeah. That's why you get scars and, you know, bones don't, you know, get perfect, you know, mending and so forth, like they've never been broken again and so forth. There's slightly imperfection process of that. And the dominant harmonic frequency of a hologram just makes that more perfect.
So you're saying that the damaged tissues wants to conform back to the dominant harmonic frequency resonance
Correct.
that will can heal itself. Yeah, cool.
Correct.
So instead of the plasma and the gel that Ileana was talking about in her write-ups. Ileana, what say you about this? I mean, does it bring back any memories, cellular memories about the harmonic frequency resonance?
Well, when you take somebody's perfect genetic scan, right, when they're at their healthiest, you can overlay that on damaged DNA. You can take mitochondria cells and overlay it to program it with genetic editing and sequencing to fix any damage in the body and make it healthy again. So that's what I remember from the perspective of genetic editing and mitochondrial cell regeneration. You could program genetically anything to go and fix something in the body. And you can also use nanotechnology to insert this nanotech into the body, and it goes and fixes things. So I remember it more from a technological, nanotechnology and genetic editing perspective. That's how I remember it. But say if you have a holographic medical pod that is plasma-based technology and frequency, then yes, it could just harmonically fix the body, anything that's wrong in the body, if you have that type of a pod. So it really depends on what technology you're using and how you're using it, in my opinion.
For sure. Yeah, they're all different ideas that somebody came up with that they're still experimenting on which one works the best and is the most cost effective in the field. That's why they're,
That's why my platform in FESIG is to bring all those of the same areas of thinking and developing the same technology come together and help each other out. So that there won't be any reinventing the wheel, really, and then you can develop it a lot faster. But there you go. You were thinking otherwise. You're saying that you would like to retain the proprietary whatever that you have been developing thus far, because there's the compromise of security. Okay, fair enough.
And that's
to
do our best to guarantee access. We think that's the best way to guarantee access, is to maintain control over it. So I've had some arguments with people about that before, but yeah, we think it's just the best way to guarantee access, that if you hand it over to somebody else or another corporation buys it, they're going to restrict access, and that's not what we want. So you can't hand it off to someone else if we want to be able to guarantee access.
Or they'll change your technology and make it into something you didn't intend.
Right.
Exactly.
That too.
Yeah, true. Security is paramount there. Yeah, for the best intentions. Yeah. Oh, you remember when you were speaking at FESIG, Captain Randy, you would suggest, we suggested, our team of scientists and researchers was suggesting, I think it was Dr. Elizabeth Donovan was suggesting Top Gearden's provisional pattern, which is using the phase conjugation, using quantum potentials to entangle to a previous version of itself, taking a pattern from the healthy arm tissue to overlay onto the injured state. So we are exploring the three different directions now. We first were talking about the genetic blueprint, okay? When it's in perfection, when you're young, you had that in database. We don't have that now. So then you were talking about the dominant, earlier on we were talking about not dominant harmonic frequency resonance, okay, from the genetic profile and the cellular tissue in the arm. And then the third one, we're talking about the phase conjugation, taking a pattern from the healthy arm tissue to overlay on the injured one. So these are things that if you would consider people putting like 2 heads is better than 1, 3 heads is better than 2, kind of thing, you know, waveform and quantum entanglement technology can be discussed.
Yeah, it's not my speciality to, understand the nuts and bolts of that, other than to say that they're different ways to achieve the same result, and I'm fine with achieving that same result in any number of ways, but it's definitely theoretically feasible from where I'm standing, as far as I understand.
Well, on the planetary corporations, they take your most healthiest DNA sample, your genome. They take your whole genome and they keep it in a database. So they always have access to the healthiest sample they possibly can, and then they can work from that to fix you and heal you in the pods and other technologies. So obviously there's different ways of going about it. I agree with Randy, and I don't specialize in that. I just know what they did on Planetary Corp.
Well, I suppose because we are here together in the round table, I just wanted the two of you to compare notes here. You were talking about jump gates, Captain Randy, jump gate technology, or a localized wormhole technology to transport people from one place to another. And you said that it took just a few minutes by the wormhole from the moon base to Mars. Is that what you had been traveling on as well, Ileana, when you could remember?
Well, they have jump gate portals. You know, they have a kind of like, it's a circular platform you step into, you materialize, dematerialize. So that's a transporter. That's one type of a technology where you can dematerialize and materialize. That's Star Trek technology. Or there's the portal technology where you step into, it's mechanical, it activates the wormhole, you go into that and you're on the other side. So that's more Stargate way technology, Stargate SG-1, just to make comparisons for what's been disclosed on Earth. So there's those two types of technologies for physically being transported, the body. And there's also in space the web portals that open up either mechanically or naturally activated, where spaceships go through. So there's different types of portal stuff that you can use. Some people can naturally telepathically open up a portal in space somewhere on a planet and walk through, but that's using a lot of psionics and that's special training.
Yeah, for sure.
Interesting. I want to ask you then about the current situation, the pandemic situation that is happening right now. I'm sure you've got something to say about that, Captain Randy.
It's just phase one of a series of phases that will lead us to a disclosure event probably later this year. So, yay. I hate always saying this, but you got to break some eggs to make an omelet. And so we get to break some eggs to make an omelet. And when it all sorts out, it'll be better than it was before. But there's going to be some chaos, and there's going to be some restructuring, and there's going to be pandemic issues, global military issues, civil disruption issues, but it's, you know, it's all going to get us to where we need to go at some point. It's just going to be a bit messy to get there. But we're expecting a disclosure event later this year or early next year, really, is what we're on schedule for. That can change, but that's what we're on schedule for.
Randy, what do you think will be disclosed in that event?
It's probably most likely going to end up being an invasion event. So a bunch of things will get disclosed that they want to be disclosed, and they won't talk about the things they don't want to talk about. So it's going to control the narrative, but it will get us on the other side of disclosure, which is all that matters, so that we can get past the technology embargoes, the trade embargoes, the travel embargoes, the consciousness embargoes. So it gets us where we want to be, even if it's not the way that necessarily we all want to get there. So I try to tell people who want to argue with me about the process, look, it's not my decision, first of all, so you can't argue with me about the process. But I would suggest that whether it's the way that we ideally think it's supposed to happen or not, it's still going to get us where we want to be. And it'll still work out in the end. We're going to get past the embargoes. But like I said, it might be a bit of a messy process getting there.
So you're still getting to go to conferences and meetings to get your directives from your superiors in the USMC SSMDF?
It's special USMCSS, United States Marine Corps Special Section. Yeah, no, I get regular briefings from my Brigadier General. I have access to intelligence personnel. I have access to a lot of information and a lot of data with my superior chain of command, no question.
So you reckon that this alien invasion, not invention, we're talking about inventions all the way. The invasion, is that a staged one, or is it a natural one?
It's a scripted event, but as I tell people, you know, if people are really dying, it's not a fake invasion. You know, it's still a real invasion if people are dying. But a scripted event just means that it's going to start a certain way, go a certain way, and end a certain way, and that's going to be what that's going to be. That's at least how I can tell it how I've been told. How it's all going to work out and sort out in real life is going to be up for all of us to wait and see. But I can only relay as I've been told how it's going to go down. So that's my understanding of it.
Scripted as in like Hollywood production, as in Blueprint?
As in there's a intentionally set beginning, middle, and end. I wouldn't say Hollywood has anything to do with it, but it's a, you know, scripted in the sense there's a beginning, a middle, and an end that's intentional.
It'll be interesting to see whether it's subtle or it's mass global, something that people will like, oh my God, there's alien ships above our heads. What the heck is that? Would it be something like that or just more subtle?
Oh yeah. Oh, it's going to be big. It's going to be big.
It's going to be big. It's going to be, and that's going to be casualties, deaths.
Lots. Oh yeah, lots. We expect before the pandemic is over that there will be, you know, well over 1 million casualties globally. We're also
mass depopulation. Then you're talking about murder in the street.
I wouldn't call it mass depopulation. Mass depopulation would have to involve, you know, hundreds of millions of people. You know, losing them when we're almost to 9 billion, losing 1 million people is not mass depopulation in any way, shape, or form. That's just, you know, 1 million people dying. So in order to have a mass depopulation, it would have to be hundreds of millions of people that would have to die. We don't expect the numbers to be that large at all.
Whoever wrote the script are murderers, and we don't condone that.
Well, let me put it another way. If we don't do it this way, the more people who will die from the consequences of not having a scripted event will be more. So military men often are left with a decision-making process and where you have 2 columns of fatalities, one which is very high and one which is lower. And when you are looking at 2 columns of fatalities, you pick the lower column, not because, you know, you want that many people to die, but because you don't want the larger column of people to die. So you pick the smaller number because that's what your option is. There is no option on the table where there's not going to be people who die. That's not an option. So we're picking the smaller number.
Yeah, pardon me for being blunt. So you're saying that a scripted invasion will cause less casualty than the vax?
No, I think a scripted invasion will cost less lives than the socioeconomic environmental collapse that we're headed towards. So we have inevitable collapses that will cost far more lives if we don't intervene. So the intervention of an event will cost fewer lives. It's not pretty. No one likes it. Like I said, it's breaking eggs to make an omelet, but you're looking at 2 columns, one where this many people die and one where this many people die. You don't want this column. You take this column instead. So it's picking less. It's picking less casualties.
So the casualties, are they targeted or are they random?
Let's just say there's going to be some house cleaning. So some of those targets will be specific. Some will also be slightly random based on, you know, what's happening in what locations and what choices people make to leave their homes and run out into the street, or whether they, you know, stay under the kitchen table and run for cover.
So
people can make stupid decisions during an invasion. They can do dumb things and get themselves killed.
Sure. So could you give us a little bit of a hint on the timeline, and could you give some advice so some of us who are awakened or whatever, who will be useful for the new coming, better world, will be safe, please?
The escalation that we're expecting to see is from pandemic to civil disruption, domestic terrorism, certainly here in the US. It may take place in some other countries, but it's pretty much going to really start here as far as that civil domestic terrorism problem. That will escalate. The global military powers will smell the blood in the water, as it were, and then we're very likely to be engaged in some sort of firefight exchange with the Russians in Syria, the Chinese in the South China Sea, and the Iranians in the Strait of Hormuz. The North Koreans are still a wild card factor there. But once we're seen as being internally weak, that will escalate global military conflict. From global military conflict, we'll get to invasion. So there's a series of steps. It's pandemic, civil disruption, global conflict, alien invasion. So there will, I can't say exactly how that's going to go because one has to happen first before the next one can happen. And right now we're watching very closely how domestic terrorists are being arrested and how they're talking to each other to spread the virus to FBI agents and police officers, and how to attack and assault police officers and state legislatures and so forth, and sort of how long it's going to take for that to get from where we're at to something that's like a full hot conflict, and then where that will escalate the next step. So it's not about there being a timetable of days, weeks, or months. It's an event-based timetable. So as we go from event to event to event, you're just going to know that the next one is coming, the next one is coming sometime soon after that stage in the event.
Like within this year, within a year?
We think there's a strong chance that it could happen before the end of this year, but if not before the end of this year, definitely next year, or so probably early.
If some of us able to survive all these stages of events, what are we to
Most people will
forward to in the end of it all?
Like I said, the introduction of advanced technologies, the breakdown of the trade embargoes, the travel embargoes, so that we will have exchange programs between terrestrial personnel, extraterrestrial personnel, increases in manufacturing of the advanced technologies. We will see a significant economic boom from all of that, and an information boom from all of that. So when we get to the other side of it, we can expect to see a lot of benefits from going through that process that will change the world that we live in. So there really will be a before the disclosure event and an after the disclosure event reality that we live in. So whatever's happening now is really not going to matter once we're after that, because after that, we're just going to have a whole other series of factors to deal with as far as technology, manufacturing, travel, information, but mostly trade. Mostly what we're going to see is that the technology advances and the introduction of having all of these other extraterrestrial species that we're going to get introduced to through the process will enable a massive trade structure to sort of blossom out of that, so that there is an increasing demand for terrestrial made products. We make stuff better than a lot of other species do. So other species love our stuff. And when the embargoes are down, then there's just going to be massive demand, massive manufacturing demand, massive supply and demand issues. And so we're all going to get to be able to figure out what we're going to do on the supply end to meet that demand. It will shoot the economy like a rocket through the roof. So we're experiencing a major negative economic impact right now, but that's going to shift, and it's going to be. I'm not saying it's not going to be an ugly process. It will be an ugly process, but getting to the other end of it, we'll be able to clean it up after that. And as difficult as it is for some people to try and grasp all of this, I'd say the simplicity of it is, if we do it in a nice way, where you have a spaceship that lands on the front lawn and they come out and say, "Take me to your leader," essentially the blowback from religious extremists would make sure that that would not be a smooth or a clean process. It would be a very, very ugly process. By turning it into a more controlled event with a hostile source, that then turns into a hostile and a friendly source, that we can, you know, look at and psychologically examine what it means to have bad aliens, good aliens, in this very, very black and white simple process for people who are under 100 IQ, which is half the population, then that gives them a narrative that they can function with. If we don't give them a narrative that they can function with, the religious extremists will go nuts. And believe me, that's much worse. It's much, much worse.
And what happens to us that know about these spaceships and how to tell the invasion apart? We just sit back and let it watch it out, how it happens, and just knowing what we know, just let it process itself out, would you say?
Let me put it this way. It's gonna happen whether I do anything, you do anything, or anybody does anything. So we're in the process. You might as well just hang on to your hat and wait it out.
Okay, so you're talking about, okay, then how does the Galactic Federation come into play here? I mean, are
They don't.
the ones who are giving the directives on this scripted?
Nope.
They don't.
Nope, absolutely not. They are taking no part in it whatsoever. They are not participating in it. They aren't planning it. They have nothing to do with it. This is a terrestrial driven and planned event, and the species that we're having help us out are also participating in that, but this is not an intergalactic affair. This has nothing to do with the Federation. They have no say in this matter whatsoever.
So this is part of the SSP?
Yeah, absolutely. It is a covert military space program plan, and that's just the way it's going to happen.
Yeah, ETs really have no say in this because it's none of their business, and a lot of them have prime directives not to interfere with us. We have to grow as a civilization, and it's up to us to start and clean up and restart and clean up our own stuff. So they can't get involved in human affairs.
Yeah, and they'd certainly like to see us get through our disclosure event one way or another, and it's our choice. And if they're like, well, if that's how you're going to do it, okay, that's how you're going to do it. So they get to stand by and watch the process and then engage in the trade and technological information exchange when it's all over, that they're more than happy and desiring to want to take part in as well. So the way in which we do that is our choice as a planet. It's not anybody else's choice. No one else is telling us how it's going to be done or how it can't be done. It's our call. It's not their call. And that's how it's going down.
Yeah, because honestly, it's space humans on Mars, on the moon. They're breakaway civilizations that branched off from Earth and made it all secret, and they have their own platforms now and their own survival. They don't really depend on us for their survival, but they will likely stage something to get the secret embargo down. Something has to happen.
Yeah, because it turns out they need us. They need more people in factories, and they need more people in the manufacturing process and in the developing process. And the multi-trillionaire, quadrillionaires have done the math, and in order for them to continue making trillions and quadrillions of dollars, they need us. So it's going to end up working out, because we're, as much as they wanted to leave us all, break away and say, screw you, planet people, it's just not going to work out that way. They need us. And so the covert military space program needs bodies and boots in chairs in front of screens. There's a lot of jobs where you just need someone to sit in front of a screen and watch, monitor the screen and push buttons. We need a certain number of people to do those jobs in the support structure to facilitate the larger program, and we don't have enough personnel for that. We need more bodies in manufacturing plants to manufacture the new technologies and the advanced stuff that we're manufacturing to sell off world, and we don't have enough bodies to do that. So at some point, the conversation had to come to a place where the powers that control the money decided that we were going to have to go bring everything back together from the breakaway attempt. Instead of breaking it away, we have to bring it back together because they need us. So that's going to work out okay, because they need bodies and boots and chairs and in factories to make the productions happen.
So those colonies is going to come back here from Mars and the moon?
No, they're not coming back. They're staying there. But we're going to integrate the technology and the trade and the information awareness.
We might be going to them, some of us.
Oh, okay.
Oh yeah, space mining, manufacturing, and other places. Oh yeah, it's going to expand, and people are going to get to go places and do things. Oh yeah.
So whatever was happening to the Homo sapiens sapiens ascension program, which is supposed to be like happening like now, on its way?
My understanding is ascension is a personal process. It's an individual thing that people do with personal development and personal spiritual discipline. It is not something that happens on a mass scale without critical mass, and we're nowhere near critical mass. We've got 1% of 1% of people who are in sort of an evolved consciousness state, where 99.9% of the rest of the population is not. That's not critical mass. So there's no way we're going to achieve a mass ascension event. I see no way in which that's going to happen. It's an individual process in which individuals can achieve that. But as far as a mass ascension event, no, it's not happening this century.
We're not even a type 1 civilization on the Kardashev scale. So like, I agree with Randy, ascension is a personal thing, it's internal. And to reach mass ascension, you have to be at least 1 or type 2 on the Kardashev scale.
At least.
Yeah. So personally, I'm interested in seeing what this wild ride will get us at the end of it.
Yeah, absolutely.
There's so many channelers out there with information that I don't know whether you may say disinformation, where I was saying that there's going to be a mass ascension happening, and it's almost like going to be...
Well, I don't know that it's misinformation. I think that it could just be creating the most positive mental framework for certain people to attach themselves to, which is, I mean, if I had the choice to say, do I want people to believe that there's going to be some sort of hopeful mass change event, or do I want people to be anxious and depressed that, you know, it's just going to be a hard slog the whole way through? From a PR point of view, I can see wanting to give people a more rose-colored, you know, candy-coated version of that, so that they can put their positive thought process into collective creation of something that's more positive. I get that. I don't necessarily think it's misinformation. I think it's directing groups of people in their consciousness towards something that's more positive, but I just don't think it's going to work out that way.
Well,
so, because I don't think the laws of physics conform to that.
It's not disinformation, because I believe, as a trained hypnotherapist and experienced one practicing for many years, I believe that our thoughts are manifesting our reality. It's a self-fulfilling prophecy. And if many of us think that we are ascending, and so we are, so the mechanism of manifesting it will be a lot quicker and faster. I think they're doing a good job saying that we all are, but there again, we want to be prepared. We want to be practical, and if that scripted invasion is going to be what's going to come on, then people have to be prepared. So that's why this video session that we're doing is good for people to be prepared and stock up food and seeds and whatnot. And would you recommend, Randy, that people move to warmer climes, so that when this invasion happens, there's certainly going to be power cuts and
there's going to be some interruptions with the supply chains. There's going to be some interruptions with that, but it's not going to be the kind of mass interruptions that some people think it's going to be. I just recommend that people not be in the major metropolitan areas. Those are going to be the messiest places to be, and I wouldn't recommend that anyone who doesn't want to be at ground zero not be in a major metropolitan area. If you live in a city that's over 1 million people, get the fuck out.
I live in London.
Yeah.
What about you, Ileana? How are you?
Honestly, get your toilet paper, get your food, 3 weeks of food, water, mineral water, get your isopropylene, get some alcohol to disinfect yourself if need be, get your hand sanitizer. Those are things that are missing now, not on sale. So get as much as what you need essentially for life to keep you through a month or 2 or whatever, you know, a couple of weeks. Get all of that stuff, water, food, cleansing products, personal hygiene products, all of those things that you need for daily life. Prepare a stash. Make sure you have a pantry. Make sure you have a place to lock yourself in securely. I mean, in planetary corporations, we were prepared to, you know, if the zombie apocalypse happens, be prepared. Have your weapons, have everything at the ready, and they can do zombie apocalypse. They can engineer that, genetically engineer zombies, vampires, werewolves. You want it, they got it. It's myth to us, it's reality to them. They can make things in those labs. So have yourself ready and be prepared, and don't panic on this Titanic.
It sounds like
panic is going to be the worst thing. It's really people freaking out and being scared and panicking that's going to create the most damaging reality for them. So, you know, maintaining groundedness, centeredness, basic preparedness. Yeah, I recommend all of those things, but, you know, don't be at ground zero if you don't want it to, don't sit in the front row at a Gallagher concert unless you want to get smashed with a squishy watermelon. So, you know, don't be in the front row if you don't want to get splattered with squishy watermelon, because that's just what's going to happen. Move to the back row somewhere where that's not likely to occur. I live in Sedona, Arizona. We're not a primary, secondary, or even a tertiary target zone. We're a green zone. So I'm great here. We're perfectly fabulous here. And I would just recommend that people do the best thing that they can for themselves and their family and their well-being. It's all personal choice. Stay where you want to stay. Go somewhere if you don't want to be there. But I'm recommending people not be in the major metropolitan areas. That's my personal recommendation.
Oh, I think we're...
How much time do people have to make a move to a safer place?
Months at the most. Months at the most. So I would suggest that anyone who really is thinking about that, do it now before it's too late.
Yep. And I think this is on a good note where we can just, we've covered quite a bit, and I think we're good for today, right?
Thank you, Ileana.
Thank you, guys. And again, I think on the ascension level, we're internally doing our ascension, like Randy said. I'm careful with channeling and all that stuff. Just not all, some of it could be not disinformation, some could be disinformation, just a note of caution.
Well, and channeled information isn't information in and of itself that's superior or worse than information that you or I have. So a channeler doesn't necessarily guarantee that their information is more accurate, more truthful, or more anything. It's just information. It's somebody else's on a telephone line to some other place that's giving that information. It doesn't necessarily mean because it's channeled that it's automatically correct and amazing, or that it's automatically bullshit and should be discounted. That's just not correct. So some channeled information is going to be more correct than others, and people have to use their own discernment there.
Yeah, agreed. So thank you guys so much for coming in and joining us today.
Thanks for having me.
Oh, thank you.
What a good session we had. Thank you, Captain Randy. Thank you, Ileana.
Thank you. Good chatting with you both.